Have you ever felt like the more you depend on others, the emptier you feel inside? Like the lack of support isn't a tragedy, but maybe exactly what your soul needs to grow stronger. What if the silence of solitude is actually life's invitation for you to rebuild yourself without noise, without distractions? So often we think we can only win if someone walks beside us. But what if the greatest victory is learning to walk alone, rise alone, and win without having to prove anything to anyone? The truth is, no one's coming to save you. No one will hold your hand through the darkness if you're not even willing to do that for yourself. And when that realization hits, it stings, but it also sets you free, because at that moment, you stop waiting and start moving. You begin to face the mirror with more resolve. You start choosing courage over comfort. And that's when true stoicism begins, when we stop emotionally relying on the world and start, open-heartedly, taking full responsibility for who we're becoming. If you've made it this far, it's because this message spoke to you, and I invite you to keep walking with us. Here you'll learn how to use solitude as strength, how to develop an unshakable mind, and how to transform pain into clarity. So go ahead and subscribe, because every video here is designed to give you tools for transformation, practical wisdom, and emotional mastery. And if this journey makes sense to you, trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. You know why so many people fear being alone? Because silence screams. It exposes everything we hide when we're surrounded by voices, distractions, and people. Solitude, when embraced consciously, becomes a mirror, one that doesn't distort, flatter, or judge. It just shows, and what that reflection reveals can hurt, but it can also heal, because it's in the silence of "no one's here for me" that you start to discover who you really are. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Solitude trains us not to depend on what's outside." That's more than just a wise quote. It's a brutal and liberating practice. When you stop filling the emptiness with external distractions, you begin to fill yourself with presence, awareness, and truth. It's like building a solid house within yourself, and this house doesn't collapse when others leave. It stays, it shelters you, it protects you. But be warned, this process hurts. It hurts to realize how much you've chased approval, how often you compromised to be accepted, how many times you stayed silent just to avoid being abandoned. It hurts to see how much you abandoned yourself to hold on to those who didn't value you. But at the same time, that pain is the beginning of your rebuild. It's the breaking point between who you were trying to please and who you can finally be in peace. And no, this isn't about isolating yourself from the world or rejecting connection. It's about no longer being a slave to it, about no longer making someone else's presence your emotional crutch. Stoicism teaches us that true freedom lies in inner independence, in being whole even when everything around you is falling apart, in smiling quietly, in choosing serenity over the anxiety to please. And it all starts when you face the void without fear and choose to fill it with your own presence. Once you learn to walk in silence, you become dangerous to everything that once controlled you. You no longer react in desperation. You don't beg for presence. You don't shrink to fit. You simply observe, choose, and move on. That unsettles anyone who tried to control you through absence, rejection, or emotional manipulation. Because now your silence is your shield. And more than that, it's your identity. You're someone who doesn't need, but who can choose. If this resonated with you, drop a comment. Silence built me. I want to know who here has started walking this path of emotional self-sufficiency. And don't go anywhere, because up next we'll talk about how expecting from others is silently wounding you, and how Stoicism can help you finally let go of that weight for good. Have you ever found yourself thinking, why haven't they replied? Why did they change with me? Why does no one seem to understand me? These silent questions are emotional traps we build for ourselves. Expecting things from others, be it attention, recognition, or even an apology, is like handing over the remote control of your emotions to someone who doesn't even know what they want from their own life. And every time you expect too much, you hurt a little more. Seneca said, "The less you expect from others, the freer you will be." It's an uncomfortable truth, but a liberating one. Expectation is the root of almost all frustration. We write out a perfect script in our minds, how the person should act, what they should say, how they should treat us. But reality doesn't follow that script. And when it breaks that narrative, the pain doesn't come from what happened, but from what we expected to happen. The pain is in the illusion, not the fact. Understanding this is the first step toward emotional protection. Because yes, you can love someone, coexist with them, support them, without needing them to respond exactly how you imagined. That's maturity. That's detachment without coldness. It's connection without dependency. It's choosing to act with kindness without bleeding while waiting for something in return. When you learn to give without expecting, you stop hurting over silence, over indifference, over ingratitude. And this is where Stoic philosophy becomes your antidote. It teaches that the only thing you truly control is your action, never someone else's reaction. You can't control someone's tone, how long they take to answer, or the choices they make. But you do control your internal response to all of it. And when that response comes from awareness instead of neediness, you grow stronger. You stop being a hostage and start becoming the author of your own peace. Start noticing how much of your sadness comes from what others didn't do. And what if instead of demanding, you just accepted? Acceptance isn't passivity, it's intelligence. It's realizing that if something hurts you over and over, maybe it's not the other person that needs to change. Maybe you need to stop expecting. That doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. Free to act from values, not from a need for validation. Free to live without relying on others' movement. If this message touched something in you, comment below. I release what I can't control. That's a giant leap toward emotional liberation. And speaking of control, next we're going to uncover the illusion that controlling everything keeps you safe, when in truth it may be what's breaking you from the inside. Have you ever tried to control everything around you? People's reactions, how conversations unfold, or the smallest details of the future? If so, you've probably felt anxious. Because control is a seductive illusion. It gives us the false sense of security, when in fact it's a trap, a constant tension where everything must go exactly as planned. And when it doesn't, what follows is frustration, fear, and exhaustion. What you call being organized might actually be a desperate attempt to avoid pain. Epictetus taught that suffering comes from trying to control what isn't ours to control. And this applies to everything. Relationships, people's decisions, project outcomes, even how long something takes to happen. What's beyond your reach is not your responsibility. But the ego resists this truth. It wants to guarantee success, avoid rejection, predict every mistake. In that desperate effort, you lose the present, disconnect from peace, and forget that life isn't about manipulation. It's about flow. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up on life. It means trusting your ability to respond to the unexpected. When you release rigid plans, you make space for something even better to unfold. You act with intention, but not with obsession. You prepare yourself, but you accept whatever comes. And in that balance lies real power. Because you don't need to predict every step. You only need to be fully present in each one. That is strength. That is presence. That is Stoicism in practice. Look at your daily routine. How often do you blame yourself for things that weren't even fully under your control? How many sleepless nights over what slipped through your hands? It's like rowing against the current. You might persist, but you'll burn out. The wise learn to row with the flow of life, adjusting the sails rather than fighting the wind. And that's how they go further, with less strain, less suffering, and more awareness. The obsession with control is fear in disguise. Fear of failing, of being disappointed, of losing. But trying to avoid pain is the same as never truly allowing yourself to feel life. Pain teaches, the unexpected strengthens, and failure, as painful as it is, reveals where growth needs to happen. That's why Stoicism doesn't ask you to build walls, it asks you to prepare. Prepare your mind to accept everything with serenity, and act with clarity, even when nothing goes as expected. If this hit home, comment below. Letting go is freedom. That shows you're ready to trade control for trust. And speaking of trust, next we're going to explore what truly strengthens you from within. The discipline to do what's right, even when no one's watching. It's easy to appear strong when there's an audience. What's truly hard is maintaining integrity when there's no applause, no reward, no one around to validate your effort. And that's exactly where Stoicism steps in. It teaches that virtue doesn't need witnesses, that doing what's right in silence is worth more than 1,000 public speeches. Because true strength doesn't shout, it's quiet, discreet, and immensely powerful. It's forged in your invisible choices, in the battles you face alone, in the sacrifices no one ever sees. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you rise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That simple reminder shows that every ordinary moment is a chance to grow. You don't need a spotlight to evolve. You just need the courage to act with ethics, even when everything around you tempts you to do the opposite. It's not easy, but that's the kind of training that transforms you. You grow stronger when you choose effort over excuses. When you choose discipline over fleeting motivation. You know those moments when you're tired, no one's watching, and quitting seems easier? That's exactly where you're being built. That's where your character is formed. Because anyone can behave well when being watched, but few can hold on to purpose in the dark. And that's why Stoicism values self-mastery so deeply. It's the foundation of a coherent life, a life where your actions speak louder than your words, where your discipline leads, not your mood. True strength doesn't need to be proven. It reveals itself naturally. It shows up when you keep your word, even when breaking it would be easier. When you choose the hard path, not because someone's watching, but because it's the right one. And that kind of conduct builds something rare, self-trust. When you know you can count on yourself, everything changes. The outside world might fall apart, but you remain steady. That's the essence of Stoicism. An inner fortress built brick by brick, through every silent decision, every action that no one will clap for, but that you know matters. And the more you live this way, the less you need recognition. You stop chasing validation, because you become your own reference point, and that is freedom. That is strength. That is peace. If this message resonated with you, comment, "My strength is silent." I want to know who here is truly committed to self-growth, even when no one's watching. Now let's move on to an even subtler form of power, the power of not reacting. Because sometimes, your greatest strength lies in remaining silent. Have you noticed how some situations seem designed to make you explode? A provocation, an unfair criticism, a disrespectful attitude. Everything inside you screams for a reaction. But what if I told you that reacting immediately is often what makes you weak? True strength lies in mastering that impulse, because when you react in the heat of the moment, it's the other person who's in control. Stoicism teaches that wisdom begins when you choose silence, not as escape but as strategy. Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that disturbs you. When you truly understand that, you unlock a new kind of power, the power to observe before acting, to breathe before responding, to decide whether that moment even deserves your energy. This kind of self-command changes lives, because instead of reacting with anger, you choose calm. Instead of explaining yourself to someone who doesn't want to listen, you walk away with dignity. That's not weakness, that's emotional maturity. Silence is often the most powerful response you can give. It shows that you are unavailable for petty conflicts, pointless arguments, or toxic games. It protects you from impulsive regret. It preserves your energy, and it even disarms the other person. Because when someone expects a fight and meets your stillness instead, they realize you're no longer playing the same game. You've evolved beyond that level of chaos. But here's the key. Silence is not avoidance. It's a conscious choice. It's you realizing that not everything deserves your presence, your explanation, or your reaction. It's prioritizing peace over ego. And that takes training. It takes deep breaths, long pauses, and the reminder that you're not here to win arguments. You're here to win mastery over yourself. And that kind of victory is invisible on the outside, but massive on the inside. Life will keep testing your limits. People will try to throw you off balance. Circumstances will come to shake your pride. But every time you choose not to react, you're telling yourself, I'm in charge now, not the world, not the other, me. And over time, that awareness becomes armor. It becomes clarity. It becomes emotional freedom. If you felt this power inside you, comment below. I choose silence. That one decision shows that you understand self-control is worth more than any instant reaction. And in the next part, we'll talk about another kind of choice. The courage to walk away, because sometimes the wisest thing you can do is not insist. There's a quiet belief that persistence always equals strength, but the truth is, sometimes the greatest courage lies in leaving. Not out of weakness, but out of self-respect. Stoicism teaches that you're not here to force yourself into places where you're not respected, or drain your energy in spaces that don't nourish you. You're here to grow. And for that you need discernment, to know where to plant and where to stop watering a desert. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What's not good for the hive is not good for the bee." In other words, if something pulls you away from your essence, exhausts your emotional energy, or drags you downward, it's not worthy of your presence. Sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your peace, but it takes maturity. It means stopping the need to explain yourself. It means accepting that not every connection is healthy, and not every person is meant to walk beside you. Walking away is also a form of respect. Respect for your time, your energy, your path. You're not being cold for leaving what harms you. You're being wise. And oftentimes that silent decision makes more impact than 1,000 arguments, because you stop trying to change others and begin transforming yourself. And that transformation over time attracts lighter, more honest, more aligned environments. Healthy detachment is actually a declaration. I choose peace. And when you start practicing that, you realize you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to beg, convince, or chase. You simply move forward. And those who are ready will walk with you. Those who aren't will stay behind. And that's okay, because your mission isn't to rescue others. It's to remain whole. And the more whole you are, the more your presence heals, inspires, and transforms without effort. Understand this. Walking away isn't about closing your heart. It's about making room for better things to enter. It's an emotional cleansing. It's letting go of what no longer resonates with who you're becoming. It hurts, yes, but afterward, it brings relief, then strength, then freedom. And suddenly, life begins to flow with more clarity, more truth, more meaning. If this echoed within you, comment, "I choose my peace." I want to know who here has realized that insisting too much might be the very thing holding you back. Up next, we'll talk about an even deeper decision, the power of starting over, even if it means beginning from zero. A lot of people fear starting over. They cling to the past out of fear of losing what they've built, even when that life no longer makes sense. But Stoicism reminds us that what truly matters isn't outside, it's within. And when something on the outside crumbles, maybe it's life pushing you toward a stronger, more authentic version of yourself. Starting over isn't failure, it's courage. It's the bold declaration that you deserve more than a half-lived life, a dull routine, or a quiet sense of regret. Seneca said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, and starting over is one of the bravest acts of all, because you'll have to leave behind stories that shaped you, habits that sabotaged you, and people who no longer walk in step with your evolution. It's painful, it's lonely, but it's also transformative, because in that beginning, you're not just rebuilding your life, you're redefining your identity. You stop being shaped by wounds and start shaping yourself by who you're becoming. This new beginning doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real, even if it starts small, even if no one else believes in it, even if you're still afraid. Because every conscious step, no matter how small, is a brick in the foundation of your new story. And each day you choose not to return to what broke you, you're affirming, "I choose my evolution." And that choice is worth more than any former success you once clung to. Starting over requires humility. You'll have to relearn, retry, make mistakes again. But you'll also discover new strengths, new passions, new directions. You'll be surprised at how much you can still bloom once you stop clinging to what's already gone. And slowly, life begins to align with this new you. Because everything changes when you change, from the inside, with presence and intention. Stoicism doesn't ask you to forget your past. It asks you not to be imprisoned by it, to use your falls as fuel, not chains, to realize that what left might have been exactly what was holding you back, and what's coming can only arrive if you make space. That space is born in the restart, in conscious choices, in the decision to rise, dust yourself off and move forward with more wisdom, more clarity, more self-respect. If you feel like you're at that rebirth point, comment, "I'm starting again." This restart may be the most powerful thing you'll ever do for yourself. Now let's close with the lesson that ties it all together: how to win without depending on anyone. Have you ever imagined winning without having to prove anything to anyone? Without justifying your journey or carrying others on your back? Winning alone isn't about pride or coldness. It's about maturity. It's understanding that your path is sacred and it can't depend on someone else's rhythm. And when you rise alone, walk alone, and conquer alone, you realize that solitude was never absence. It was presence, yours. And that changes everything. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When you start building your life from the inside out, the world around you stops being a battlefield and becomes a reflection of your mindset. You begin to attract new opportunities, healthier relationships, and more aligned environments, not because you're chasing them, but because you've changed. Because now you are whole. You no longer beg to be loved. You radiate love. You no longer plead for support. You inspire it. The greatest victory is the inner one. It's falling asleep in peace with who you're becoming. It's being able to look back and say, "I went all the way for me," without needing applause, validation, or an audience. Because now you understand, the path is yours, the choices are yours, and the success is yours too. And that makes you free. Free from the fear of being alone, free from comparison, free from the invisible chains of needing approval. Your strength no longer comes from outside. It comes from your center. Yes, people will still come along your path. Some will add to your journey. Others will try to pull you off track. But now you know how to walk alone, and that's your greatest protection. Because now, even when the world goes silent, you keep going. Even when everything goes dark, you move forward. And that unsettles those who still depend on applause. Because you don't need it anymore. You've learned to be enough. And in that self-sufficiency, you expand. Stoicism doesn't want you to isolate. It wants you to grow strong. So when you love, you don't lose yourself. When you help, you don't burn out. When you fail, you learn without shame. True freedom is when your life no longer depends on the instability of others. When your peace is no longer shaken by external winds. And that only happens when you win on the inside, before any victory on the outside. Now that you've made it this far, it's time to look inward with honesty. Everything we've talked about, silence, detachment, emotional control, and starting over, isn't just distant theory. It's daily practice. It's real life. It's in every small decision you make when no one's watching. Stoicism doesn't want you to be immune to pain. It wants you to learn how to use it as a bridge, as a tool for growth. And if you truly absorb this message, then you're no longer the same person who pressed play on this video. So I ask you, with firmness and care, what will you do with this new perspective? Will you keep it to yourself as just another beautiful idea? Or will you start applying it, even in small steps? What habit can you let go of today? What boundary needs to be drawn? What decision has been waiting too long? Because no matter how deep the message, if it doesn't turn into action, it becomes a burden. And Stoicism calls for movement, for coherence, for the awakening of the inner master already living in you. If this video strengthened you, brought you clarity, or helped you see something in a new way, then subscribe to the channel now, because this is just the beginning. Here, you'll find content that reminds you of your power, your dignity, and your inner strength. Content to help you stay calm, master your mind, overcome anxiety, and build a life with real meaning. And if this message touched you, imagine what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stand tall even if you walk alone, because sometimes that's exactly when your greatest victory begins.